between David Icke and Jordanem Maxwell. It was recorded on the 18th of May 2010, and they are regaling each other with researchers' stories of reptilian activity on planet Earth. It's important because, as many of you will know, David Icke really was the first to break this very uncomfortable and challenging research ground in his book, The Biggest Secret. But many other researchers, Jordanem Maxwell among them, have learned that this material seems to be true. They have their own accounts. They have their own testimony from independent witnesses. There's something here that is extremely important to understand. And the information is alarming. It's entertaining, of course, for reasons of its own. But behind the entertainment and the interesting stories lies an extremely dark agenda that, in my personal belief, it is our responsibility to look at carefully and to understand as best we can what may be happening here. This is an amazing story reported by that group of people.
Oh, in the valley?
Yeah. This is a story worth hearing.
Right.
It's not a long story. It's just one of these things that's so weird it has to be true.
I was doing an interview in Los Angeles on a radio show in Las Vegas. They had called me. I was doing a 2-hour interview with them. And in the process, I just in passing mentioned the reptilian gods and the reptilian aliens. And after the program, I got a phone call from a guy who I found out later was a very wealthy man who, as I said, owned a company that buys and sells hotels and big stuff.
Right.
And he called and he said, Jordan, we were listening to you this morning in the office. And he said, I got to tell you something. He said, I have 5 men that work for me in my office. We're all Christians and we all go to the same church. And he said, once a year, I take all 5 families in my room and we go on vacation together, always. And he says, last year, and this was like in '89 when this happened. He said, last year, we all took off to do camping in Colorado. And he said, one morning, we broke camp and we walked up the top of the large hill and looked down into the valley. And he said in the valley there was a circle that had been cleared away. A round area circle had been cleared away. And there was a circle of people in robes, and they're all holding hands, swaying back and forth like some sort of a chant. And there was one person in the middle. And he said, when we were standing there watching this, we were startled to see people out in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
Out here in the middle of nowhere, they're doing a ritual. Right? And he said, all of a sudden, it popped in the center, another person popped up, but much bigger than everybody else. And he said, when that thing popped in, it pointed up at us, and all the singing stopped, everything stopped, and everyone turned, pointed up at us. He said, well, we were up on the top of the mountain, so we just going to get out of there. He said, we turned, and it was too late. That thing that was in the circle was behind them. He said that was at least 7.5 to 8 foot.
Yes, it's a classic.
Huh?
It's a classic.
Yeah, and he said the thing was 7.5 to 8 foot high, reptile, and he says, and we were all paralyzed. Couldn't move. Even the children couldn't move. Nobody could move. And he said, and this thing looked at all of us, and finally it looked at the men, and he said, and when it was looking at us, we knew what it was thinking. It was basically saying, I'm going to let you go this time, but you better get out of here, because you've interrupted something. And he says, and the thing walked away, and the people were watching it, and they went, it's gone.
Classic.
And he says, and the moment it took off, everyone started screaming, because now they come back. Now they've got their faculties back. And he said the children were screaming, the women were yelling and crying. And he said, and we ran, all of us, back to our cars. and drove home, and that's it. And he said, we're all Christians in a church, and when we heard you talking about reptile aliens, I got news for you. We know of at least one that's on the earth for real sure, because we saw it, all of us.
So that's a story you've heard before. That this,
Oh yes,
you've got this kind of
yes, and the 6, 7, 8 foot, 6, 7.5, 8 foot is a constant, repetitive description. I don't know. I told Bill before. When I'd been in America, and I'd started picking up these stories for the first time. I mean, I'd thought about it before, but there was nothing tangible. And then suddenly, I was traveling America. In 15 days, I met 12 different people who told me the same basic story about reptiles, shape-shifting, all that stuff. I come back to England, and there's a woman down the road in my town who wanted to meet me to tell me about a guy called Ted Heath, Prime Minister of Britain.
Oh, really? Ted Heath? Yeah,
Satanist. I mean, I had an amazing experience with him and his black eyes. I told you about it. But so she tells me that she was married as a mind-controlled woman. She came from Scotland. She was brought up by the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry in Scotland. And her husband was the warden of a place called Burnham Beeches. Burnham Beeches is an area of copse, woodland and clearings to the west of London near Slough, about 25 minutes drive from Chequers, which is the Prime Minister's country home, like Camp David. And it's owned by the City of London, the financial district, right? Because when you go into it, you get the logo of the City of London all over it, which is two flying reptiles holding the shield of the Knights Templar. Anyway, she tells me the story. She said she was basically a prisoner, but she said her husband was a Satanist, and the warden of Burnham Beeches is always a Satanist. They have a house in the area, right in the middle of the woods. And he's a Satanist because his job is to set up the rituals at night on certain ritual days. And after dark, I guess you can creep around on foot, but you can't, all the roads are shut. You can't get a car in there. So she said, I was out one night with the dog. This is sometime between 70 and 74. She did tell me the year, but it had to be because he was Prime Minister at the time. And she said she saw some lights, and she walked forward and crept and looked through the wood and the bushes, and she saw a circle of people in robes, and she recognised that the guy who was calling the shots was Ted Heath. And as she watched later, she saw that on one of his sides, I think it was his right hand side, was a guy called Anthony Barber, who was Chancellor of the Exchequer at that time.
Tony Barber,
who did devastating things to the British economy. Anyway, they're in this circle. And she said that they're doing these chants and rituals, and she told me all this story. And then, because I knew about Ted Heath from other sources by then, she wasn't surprising me with him at all. So then, because I've just come back from America, I had a cup of tea, and I was okay, I'm leaving now. I was just putting my cup of tea down, and she was sitting over there. And I just said to her, I'm having some very strange experiences at the moment. I keep meeting people that say they've seen people turn into reptiles. And I turned away, and all I could hear was, and I turned back, and she said, oh my God, she said, I thought it was only me. And she said, I wasn't going to tell you this bit. She said, I thought, crazy enough what I've already told you. And she went on to tell me that while she's watching this ritual, suddenly Heath transforms into a reptile figure, grows about 2 feet. And she said once he'd done that, and she said, the thing that staggered me most? No one else in the circle was in the least bit fazed or surprised or reacted to it. And she said once he was in this mode as the reptile, he started speaking, she said, like the old transatlantic telephone lines, where where there's gaps and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
And she said that when she was walking, particularly she said at dusk, when it's just starting to get dark, at that mid-light dark, she said she would see people, always in robes, heads covered, and the faces were reptilian. And I went round there, and it's a horrible place. It's a horrible place, Burnham Beeches. But this is what these people are. People say, you see Satanists everywhere. No, I see Satanists in the upper levels of society everywhere. That's what I see. There is a difference.
Yeah.
The ratio of that to the general population is massive. Of course it is. So this wherever you go in the world, you know, Kratom talks about the Chitahuri. They're 7-8 feet. Mm-hmm. It's constant.
Common thing.
Yeah.
And then there's the other story there about Nancy.
David might not have heard that one. You should tell Nancy's story. This is one that we've already recorded, but it's a fantastic story.
I have a young lady friend who is absolutely, there's no words to describe it. This young lady is a dear friend of mine. She's so well informed on the reptilian subject because her father